My name is Corinne Ellsworth. I am 34 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my mother pointed to a folding card table wedged between the refrigerator and the laundry room door, looked me dead in the eye in front of 19 guests, and said, "Corinne, sweetie, we ran out of room at the adult table, you understand." I was 34 years old. The youngest person at the kids' table was my niece, who had just turned 6. The oldest was my nephew, who was 9. I sat down between them without a word. I unfolded my paper napkin. I placed it on my lap. I smiled at my niece and told her I liked her dress. And I did not say a single thing to my mother. Not because I was weak, not because I was afraid, but because I knew something that nobody in that dining room knew. In exactly 47 minutes, a black SUV with state government plates was going to pull into the driveway, and the person stepping out of it was going to walk past the adults, past the chandelier, past my mother's crystal wine glasses and her imported tablecloth, straight to the kids' table, and sit right next to me. What they did not know was that the woman in that SUV was the governor of Virginia, and she was not there for the family. She was there for me. This is that story. To understand what happened at that Thanksgiving table, you need to understand the Ellsworth family of Charlottesville, Virginia. We lived on Ivy Road, a tree-lined stretch west of the University of Virginia campus, where old brick houses sat behind wrought iron gates and families measured worth in generations, not dollars. My parents bought the house in 1993, 2 years before I was born. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a formal dining room with a table that seated 20. That table was the center of everything. Holidays, birthdays, my father's retirement dinner, my sister's engagement party. If you had a seat at that table, you mattered. If you did not, you knew exactly where you stood. My mother, Patricia Ellsworth, was 61. She had been the chair of the Albemarle County Women's Civic League for 11 years and ran it like a small government. She organized charity galas, coordinated with local politicians, sent handwritten invitations on monogram stationery, and kept a calendar of social obligations that stretched 18 months into the future. She believed in 3 things: order, reputation, and the absolute supremacy of first impressions. Her kitchen had been featured twice in a regional homes magazine. She had the framed copies in the hallway. Her daily uniform was pressed slacks, pearl earrings, and a smile so practiced it had grooves. She was the kind of woman who would reorganize the spice rack while the house burned down, as long as the neighbors did not see the smoke. My father, Douglas Ellsworth, was 64. He had spent 31 years as a senior partner at a civil engineering firm in downtown Charlottesville before retiring in 2022. He was a man of silence. Not the thoughtful kind, the cowardly kind. When my mother made a decision about the family, Douglas nodded. When she ranked her daughters in public, Douglas studied his wine glass. When I looked at him for help, Douglas looked at the floor. His favorite phrase was, "Your mother means well, Corinne. She just has high standards." High standards. That was the family euphemism for everything Patricia did that hurt. He said it when she forgot my 21st birthday. He said it when she hung 6 framed photos of Meredith in the living room and none of me. He said it when I graduated from William and Mary with a master's degree and she spent the entire ceremony on her phone, planning Meredith's bridal shower. And then there was Meredith. Meredith Ellsworth Hargrove, my older sister. 37 years old. Graduate of the University of Virginia School of Law, class of 2012. Senior partner at Hargrove, Whitfield & Baines, a corporate litigation firm in Richmond with 42 attorneys and a client list that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. Her husband, Trevor Hargrove, was 39, a managing partner at the same firm. They had 2 children, Oliver, 9, and Cecilia, 6, both enrolled at St. Perney. Anne's Belfield, an independent school with annual tuition of $31,000 per child. They lived in a 4,000-square-foot colonial in the Rugby Road neighborhood, 14 minutes from my parents' house. Meredith drove a pearl-white Mercedes-Benz GLE. Trevor drove a charcoal Audi A8. They hosted wine tastings. They vacationed in Nantucket. They were, in every visible way. The Ellsworth family's crown jewels. My mother introduced Meredith the same way every time, at parties at church, at the Civic League holiday luncheon where she stood at a podium in front of 200 women and said it into a microphone. "This is my daughter Meredith. She is a partner at Hargrove, Whitfield. Her husband Trevor runs the firm." If I was standing right there, sometimes she would add, "And this is Corinne. She works in government. No title, no detail, no pride. Just government. The way you might say, she works somewhere." Because, to my mother, that is exactly what my career was. Somewhere. Nowhere specific, nowhere impressive, nowhere worth mentioning at a podium with a microphone. In my parents' living room, there was a wall that my mother called the family gallery. 14 framed photographs arranged in 3 rows. Meredith's law school graduation. Meredith and Trevor's wedding at Keswick Hall. Oliver's baptism. Cecilia's first birthday. Meredith receiving a Community Service Award from the Charlottesville Bar Association. Meredith and Trevor at a charity gala, her in emerald green, him in black tie. Oliver's first day of school. Cecilia in a tutu at her ballet recital. 8 of Meredith. 4 of the grandchildren. 1 of my parents at their 40th wedding anniversary dinner. 1 of the entire family at Christmas 2020, in which I was partially obscured by a poinsettia plant. I was in exactly 1 photograph on that wall, and a plant was blocking my face. I had counted those photos so many times I could describe them with my eyes closed. 14 frames, 0 dedicated to me. I stopped counting when I realized that counting was just another way of hoping, and hoping in that house had never gotten me anywhere. The pattern of erasure had been building for years, and I can trace it with the kind of specific detail that only someone who has been counting can provide. Christmas 2021, when my mother gave Meredith a $3,000 Cartier bracelet and gave me a gift card to Target for $75, I found the receipt in the kitchen trash. She had bought it at the checkout counter that morning. My father's retirement dinner in April 2022, a catered event at Keswick Hall for 60 guests. The seating chart placed me at the back table near the kitchen, between a man from my father's office I had never met and an empty chair. Meredith sat at the head table between my parents, gave a 7-minute speech about my father's legacy, and received a standing ovation. No one asked me to speak. No one asked me anything. Then there was Meredith's 35th birthday party in June 2022, a sit-down dinner at Fleury, a French restaurant downtown, where my mother had ordered a custom cake with the inscription, "To our greatest achievement." Our achievement. Singular. I was sitting 4 seats away, eating a $38 duck breast, reading those words in buttercream frosting, and I remember thinking, she did not even try to hide it. She wrote it on a cake, in frosting, for everyone to see. My 30th birthday, by contrast, had been a text message from my mother at 9:14 in the morning. "Happy birthday, Corinne. Hope you have a nice day. No dinner, no cake, no gathering." Meredith did not text at all. She posted on Instagram that evening a photo of herself at a spa with the caption, "Self-Care Sunday." My birthday is on a Tuesday. She did not even know. The truth was, I worked at the office of the Governor of Virginia. I had worked there for 3 years and 7 months. My official title was Senior Policy Advisor for Economic Development and Rural Affairs. I reported directly to the Chief of Staff, and 3 times a week I briefed the governor herself, Governor Catherine Chen, 52 years old, the first Asian American woman elected governor in Virginia's history. She had won by 11 points in a state that had been considered a toss-up. She governed with precision, empathy, and a memory that terrified lobbyists, because she never forgot a number, a name, or a broken promise. I had been recruited to her team during the transition period after the election, recommended by a professor from my graduate program at William & Mary who had served on the campaign's policy committee. I started as a junior policy analyst earning $47,000 a year. Within 18 months, I had been promoted twice. By year 3, I was earning $94,000, managing a team of 6 analysts. and had co-authored the governor's signature rural broadband initiative that had brought high-speed internet access to 43 counties across the Commonwealth. I had drafted the framework for the rural healthcare expansion that opened 9 new clinics in underserved areas. I had written the Small Business Recovery Program that distributed $28 million in grants to women-owned businesses after the supply chain crisis. These were not small things. These were the kinds of policies that changed lives in communities most politicians only visited during election years. My family knew none of this, not because I had hidden it, because they had never asked. I had told my mother I worked at the governor's office. Her response at Easter 2023 was, "That is nice, dear. Meredith just won a case worth $12 million. She did not ask what I did at the governor's office. She did not ask if I liked my work. She did not ask anything. She simply pivoted to Meredith, the way a compass pivots to north, automatically, instinctively, without thinking. I had told my father I had been promoted. His response over Sunday dinner that June was, "Good for you, sweetheart. Can you pass the potatoes?" He smiled when he said it, the kind of smile that closes a subject rather than opening one. I had told Meredith I was working on broadband policy for rural Virginia. She had laughed and said, "So you're basically IT support for farmers?" Trevor had chuckled from behind his glass of Pinot Noir. My mother had smiled the way she smiled when something confirmed what she already believed. My father had looked at his plate. That was June 2023. I stopped sharing after that. Not dramatically. Not with a declaration or a door slam. I just stopped volunteering information to people who had made it clear they did not want it. I stopped offering pieces of myself to people who kept dropping them. That was the moment I stopped being the daughter who was desperate for approval and started becoming the woman who no longer needed it. Thanksgiving 2025 was when they finally made the invisible visible. The guest list that year was 21 people. My parents, Meredith, Trevor, Oliver, and Cecilia. My Aunt Regina, my mother's older sister, 63, a retired school administrator from Lynchburg. Her husband, Uncle Franklin, 65, a deacon at their Baptist church. Their son, my cousin Keith, 32, a dentist with a practice in Roanoke. Keith's wife, Amara, 30, a pediatric nurse. 2 couples from my mother's civic league, the Porters and the Davenports, all in their late 50s, all meticulously dressed in autumn earth tones as if my mother had issued a dress code, which, knowing Patricia, she probably had. Dr. Raymond Shale, 71, a retired history professor from the university, and a longtime family friend who had known my parents since before I was born. And me, 21 people, 20 seats at the formal dining table. I arrived at 3:20 in the afternoon. I was carrying a pecan pie I had baked from scratch the night before, using a recipe I had found in a Virginia Heritage cookbook that Governor Chen had given me for my birthday. I also brought a bottle of Virginia Viognier from a winery in Fauquier County that I had visited with the governor's economic development team during a rural business tour. Details that meant everything to me and would mean nothing to them. My mother met me at the door. She looked at the pie, then at me. "You brought pecan?" Meredith already brought pecan from Bell's Patisserie. It won an award last year. She took my pie without another word and placed it on the counter behind a vase of hydrangeas where no one would see it. No thank you. No acknowledgement of the hours I had spent making it. She just disappeared my pie the same way she had disappeared me. Quickly, efficiently, without malice, as if it were simply the natural order of things. I walked into the living room. The table was already set. 20 places. White linen, my mother's Lenox Federal Platinum china, sterling silver flatware that had belonged to my grandmother. Every seat had a handwritten place card in my mother's careful calligraphy. I scanned the cards. Patricia, Douglas, Meredith, Trevor, Regina, Franklin, Keith, Amara, Mr. Porter, Mrs. Porter, Mr. Mara, Davenport, Mrs. Davenport, Dr. Shale, Oliver, Cecilia, 20 cards. No Corinne. I found my mother in the kitchen at 4:05. Mom, I do not see a place card for me at the table. She did not look up from the cranberry sauce she was stirring. We ran out of room, Corinne. 20 seats, 20 people. I set up the card table in the back for you. You will be fine. The card table. The folding table my parents used for the children when the grandkids were too young for the formal dining room. The table wedged between the refrigerator and the laundry room door, covered with a plastic tablecloth printed with cartoon turkeys. Paper plates, plastic cups, mismatched folding chairs. Mom, Oliver, and Cecilia are sitting at the main table. They have place cards. Oliver is 9. She paused her stirring for 1 second. They are Meredith's children. She said it as if that explained everything. As if biology were a ranking system and Meredith's offspring held a higher position in this family than Meredith's own sister. And I suppose, in Patricia's world, they did. I looked at her for a long moment. She resumed stirring. She did not look up. She did not explain further. She did not apologize. She did not offer to rearrange. She did not acknowledge that what she was doing was extraordinary in its cruelty. She just stirred cranberry sauce and waited for me to accept it, the way I had accepted every slight, every dismissal, every quiet act of erasure for 34 years. I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not cause a scene. I simply said, "All right." And I walked to the card table and sat down. I spread my paper napkin on my lap. And I texted the governor of Virginia. She put me at the kids' table. The response came in 90 seconds. I am leaving now, 45 minutes. For the next 2 hours, I was a ghost. I refilled water pitchers. I cleared appetizer plates. I checked on the turkey. I arranged the silverware because my mother said I had done it wrong the first time. The forks were on the wrong side, apparently, even though I had set them correctly. 4 tasks in 2 hours. 4 requests to serve, to help, to disappear into usefulness. Not once did anyone ask me to sit down. Not once did anyone walk into the kitchen to check on me. Not once did anyone look through the doorway and think, why is a 34-year-old woman eating Thanksgiving dinner at a children's table? At one point, I was passing through the living room with a tray of cheese and crackers when Oliver tugged on my sleeve. Aunt Corinne, why are you always in the kitchen? Before I could answer, Meredith laughed from across the room, because that is where she is most comfortable, sweetie. She said it lightly, playfully, like a joke, but I saw Aunt Regina's face, just for a moment, a flicker of something that might have been discomfort. Then it was gone, and the room continued laughing, and I continued carrying the tray. I set it down on the coffee table. I straightened the napkins. I picked up 3 empty glasses and carried them to the sink. I washed them by hand because my mother's crystal could not go in the dishwasher. I dried them with a towel that smelled like lavender. And while I was standing there, hands in sudsy water, I heard my mother in the dining room say to Mrs. Davenport, "Meredith was always the driven one. Corinne is more of a helper. Some people are born to lead and some people are born to support. A helper, born to support." My mother had just described her 34-year-old daughter, the woman who advised the governor of Virginia, as a born helper, and she had done it while I was literally washing her dishes. At 5:12, the turkey was carved. My mother stood at the head of the formal table and clinked her glass. I could hear her from the kitchen, every word. I want to thank everyone for being here. Family is everything, and I am so proud to be surrounded by people who have accomplished so much. She looked at Meredith. "Meredith, darling, tell everyone about the Comstock Industries case." Meredith launched into a polished summary of a corporate merger she had litigated for 7 months that resulted in a settlement of $19 million. The table applauded. Dr. Shale raised his glass. Trevor squeezed Meredith's hand. My mother beamed as if the settlement had been deposited directly into her own sense of self-worth. No one looked toward the kitchen. No one mentioned me. I was not part of the toast. I was not part of the family. I was eating cranberry sauce from a can because the homemade version was reserved for the formal table and I was counting the minutes. She laughed. I counted. 47 minutes. Here's what my family did not know. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, Governor Catherine Chen had called me into her office at the Patrick Henry Building in Richmond. It was a Tuesday, 4:37 in the afternoon. She was standing at the window overlooking Capitol Square, holding a cup of green tea, watching the late autumn light turn the trees gold. "Corinne, sit down. I need to talk to you about something important." I sat. She turned from the window. "The lieutenant governor is stepping down in January. Health reasons, it will be announced next week. The transition team needs a new deputy chief of staff for policy. I want you." I stared at her. Deputy chief of staff, third in the chain of command in the governor's office, a salary of $142,000, direct access to every major policy decision in the Commonwealth of Virginia, a corner office in the Patrick Henry Building, my name on the governor's daily briefing schedule, my signature on executive memos. "Governor, I do not know what to say." "Say yes, you have earned it. The broadband initiative alone would justify this promotion, but your work on the rural healthcare expansion, the small business recovery program, the opioid response framework. Corinne, you have been the engine of this administration's domestic agenda for 2 years. Your team respects you. The legislators trust you. I trust you more than anyone in this building, and that is not something I say lightly." I said yes. We shook hands. She smiled. And then she said something that I carry with me every single day. "Corinne, I have read your file. I know your background. I know about Charlottesville. I know your family does not fully understand what you do here. So let me be very clear about something. You are not invisible. Not in this building. Not in this building. Not in the state. And not to me. The work you do matters. The people you help. The communities you have changed. That is your legacy, not a seating chart." I drove home that evening on Interstate 64 with the windows down, even though it was November and 41 degrees outside. I did not call my mother. I did not call Meredith. I did not post on social media. I did not tell a single person in my family. I just drove and let the cold air sting my face and thought about a woman who had looked me in the eye and told me I was not invisible. And I tried to remember the last time a member of my own blood family had done the same. I could not. I signed the paperwork on November 5th and moved into my new corner office on the 3rd floor on November 12th. My name was added to the governor's daily briefing schedule. My security clearance was upgraded. I was issued a new state government phone and a parking pass with my title printed beneath my name in capital letters. Deputy Chief of Staff. I kept the parking pass in my glove compartment. I kept the title out of every conversation with my family. Not because I was hiding, because I had learned that sharing good news with people who do not celebrate you is just handing them another thing to diminish. On November 14th, 2 days after I moved into the new office, the Richmond Times-Dispatch called for comment on the broadband initiative's 1-year anniversary. The reporter asked if she could profile me as part of a feature on women in Virginia politics. I agreed, on the condition that the piece not run until January. She asked why. I told her I had personal reasons. She did not press. The interview lasted 45 minutes. I talked about growing up in Charlottesville, about studying public policy at William and Mary, about the 18 months I had spent as a junior analyst learning every county's infrastructure needs by driving to each one personally in a state-issued sedan with 217,000 miles on the odometer. I talked about the night I presented the broadband framework to the governor for the first time, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pointer. I talked about watching a 12-year-old girl in Dickinson County do her homework on a laptop with reliable internet for the first time in her life, and how that moment had made every late night and every weekend at my desk worth it. I told a reporter everything about my career, and nothing about my family. Some silences are not secrets, they are boundaries. On November 18th, I attended a policy summit at the University of Virginia. It was held in the Rotunda, and the governor gave the keynote. Afterward, during the reception, a woman approached me. She was in her early 60s, wearing a silk scarf and the particular posture of someone who served on multiple boards. She asked who I was. I told her. She said, "Ellsworth? Are you related to Patricia Ellsworth from the Civic League?" My stomach tightened. "She is my mother." The woman tilted her head. "Funny. She has never mentioned you at any of our meetings. She talks about her daughter, the attorney, all the time." She paused. "But Deputy Chief of Staff? That is quite something. You would think she would lead with that." I smiled politely and excused myself. In the car afterward, I sat with the engine running for 11 minutes before I could trust my hands to stop shaking. Not from anger. From the exhaustion of being consistently erased by someone who is supposed to be your loudest champion. On November 20th, 5 days before Thanksgiving, my mother called me. This was unusual. Patricia did not call. She texted, usually with instructions. Bring a side dish. Arrive by 3. Wear something decent. But this time she called, and her voice was breathless, almost giddy. "Corinne, you work in the government, do you not?" "Yes, Mom." "Do you know anyone in the governor's office? Anyone at all?" My heart hammered. Why? Because the Civic League is hosting a holiday open house on December 14th, and we have been trying for 3 years to get Governor Chen to attend. 3 years, Corinne. Regina knows someone on the scheduling team, but we have not heard back. I thought maybe you could put in a word, since you work in government somewhere. I sat in my corner office in the Patrick Henry building. I was looking at a framed photograph on my credenza of myself standing next to the governor at the broadband launch event in Danville, both of us smiling, both of us holding oversized scissors in front of a ribbon, and I said, "I will see what I can do, Mom." She hung up without saying thank you. That evening, I sat in my apartment on Grace Street in Richmond. I ate leftover pasta. I drank a glass of the Virginia Viognier, and I thought about Thanksgiving, about the folding table, about the cartoon turkeys, about my mother's voice saying, "We ran out of room," about the governor's voice saying, "You are not invisible." 2 women, 2 messages. One had defined my past. The other was building my future. I picked up my phone and sent a text. "Governor, I know this is unusual, and I completely understand if the answer is no, but would you be willing to attend a Thanksgiving dinner in Charlottesville on the 27th? My family is hosting. I can explain more tomorrow." She responded in 14 minutes. "Is this about your family, Corinne?" "Yes." "Then I will be there. Send me the address and the time." "And Corinne, you do not have to face them alone. That is not what leadership means." I did not tell my mother. I did not tell Meredith. I did not tell my father. I did not tell anyone. I simply texted my RSVP the way I always did. 1 word. Coming. My mother responded with her usual directive. Bring a side dish. Something simple. Meredith is handling the main courses. I built it in silence. If you are still watching this, I need you to hear something. I did not invite the governor to humiliate my family. I did not do it for revenge, and I did not do it to make a scene. I did it because for 34 years I had walked into that house alone, and every single time I had walked out feeling smaller than when I arrived. I did it because I needed one person at that table who knew my name and what it meant. One person who would look at me and see Corinne Ellsworth. Deputy Chief of Staff, Policy Architect, Public Servant, not Corinne Ellsworth, the daughter who was not Meredith. If that makes sense to you, if you have ever walked into a room full of family and felt completely alone, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because this story is about to take a turn that changed my entire life. Now let me tell you what happened at 5:59 that Thanksgiving evening. I was sitting at the card table. Oliver was showing me a video on his tablet about a dog that could skateboard. Cecilia was asking me to help her draw a pilgrim hat on her crayon turkey. I had eaten my dinner on a paper plate. Turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce from a can, green beans that had gone cold because no one had thought to bring me a serving while they were hot. I could hear my mother in the dining room, holding court, telling the porters about Meredith's latest case, about Trevor's new boat, about Oliver's performance in the school's autumn pageant. Adults laughed. Crystal clinked. The chandelier cast warm light over 20 people who belonged, and one person in the kitchen who did not. At 5:59, a car pulled into the driveway. Not just any car. A black Chevrolet Suburban with Virginia state government plates and a small American flag mounted on the front antenna. Through the kitchen window, I watched it park directly behind Meredith's pearl-white Mercedes. 2 men in dark suits stepped out first, scanning the property with the calm precision of people who do this for a living. Then the rear passenger door opened and Governor Catherine Chen stepped onto the gravel. She was wearing a camel-colored wool coat over a burgundy dress, her black hair pulled back in a simple twist, small gold earrings catching the porch light. She looked like what she was, the most powerful person in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The doorbell rang at 6:02. My mother's voice floated in from the dining room, distracted, mid-sentence. "Corinne, can you get that?" "My hands are full." "Of course." The kitchen daughter answers the door. I stood up from the folding table, smoothed my sweater, and walked to the front door. I opened it. Governor Catherine Chen stood on the porch, flanked by 2 members of her security detail. She looked at me and smiled. Not a political smile. Not the smile she used at fundraisers or press conferences. A real one. "Hello, Corinne. Happy Thanksgiving." "Happy Thanksgiving, Governor. Please come in." She entered the foyer. Her security detail positioned themselves near the front entrance, quiet and professional. From the dining room, my mother called again. "Who is it, Corinne? If it is a delivery, just leave it on the porch." Governor Chen looked at me. I looked at her. She nodded once. And then we walked together into the dining room. The first person to recognize her was Dr. Raymond Shale. He had been mid-sentence, telling a story about Thomas Jefferson's library. He stopped talking. His fork was suspended halfway between his plate and his mouth. He set it down very slowly. The color left his face. "Good Lord," he said quietly. "That is Governor Chen." The room went silent, not gradually, not the way conversations wind down. Instantly. Like someone had pressed mute on a remote control, 20 pairs of eyes turned toward the doorway where I stood next to the governor of Virginia. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound came out. Meredith's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Trevor sat up straight in his chair like a reflex. Aunt Regina gripped the edge of the table. Uncle Franklin set down his napkin. Mrs. Porter turned to Mr. Porter with an expression I can only describe as bewilderment. My father looked at me, then at the governor, then back at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Confusion. Followed by the slow, dawning, devastating weight of understanding. Governor Chen stepped forward. Her voice was warm, unhurried, the voice of a woman who was accustomed to entering rooms and commanding them without raising her volume by a single decibel. "Mrs. Ellsworth, I apologize for arriving unannounced. I know this is a family gathering, and I do not want to intrude. But your daughter Corinne invited me, and I simply could not say no." She paused and let that sentence settle into every corner of the room. "You see, Corinne is not just a member of my staff. She is my deputy chief of staff. She is one of the most brilliant policy minds in the Commonwealth of Virginia. She drafted the broadband initiative that connected 43 counties. She built the rural healthcare framework that opened 9 clinics. And she told me she would be spending Thanksgiving with her family. So I wanted to stop by and meet the people who raised such an extraordinary woman." The silence was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I could hear Cecilia's crayon rolling across the card table in the kitchen. I could hear my mother breathing. Patricia Ellsworth stood up slowly. Her face was the color of the white linen tablecloth. Her hands were trembling. "Governor Chen, what an honor." We had no idea. We did not know that Corinne was. that she held such a, "Please, please, sit down. Let me set a place for you at the table." Governor Chen looked at the formal table. 20 seats, 20 handwritten place cards, Linux china and sterling silver, and a centerpiece of fresh flowers that probably cost $200. Then she looked through the doorway into the kitchen. At the folding card table, the paper plates, the plastic cups, the cartoon turkey tablecloth. "Actually, Mrs. Ellsworth," the governor said, and her voice was perfectly pleasant, perfectly calm, perfectly devastating. "I notice that Corinne is seated in the kitchen. If it is all the same to you, I would like to join her there." She turned to me. "Corinne, is there room at your table?" I did not look at my mother. I did not let that moment land as a weapon. I simply said, "There is always room, Governor." We walked back to the kitchen together. Governor Catherine Chen sat down at the folding card table on a mismatched folding chair between me and 6-year-old Cecilia. She placed a paper napkin on her lap. Cecilia looked at her with enormous eyes and said, "Are you somebody important?" The governor smiled and said, "Not as important as you, sweetheart. That is the most beautiful turkey I have ever seen. Can you teach me how to draw one?" Cecilia beamed and handed her an orange crayon. From the dining room, I heard nothing. No conversation, no clenching crystal, no laughter. Just the suffocating, airless silence of 20 people realizing that the daughter they had put at the children's table was the reason the governor of Virginia was sitting in their kitchen, eating off a paper plate, drawing turkeys with crayons. My mother appeared in the doorway. 3 minutes later, her composure was cracking at the seams. "Governor Chen, please, we can make room at the main table. For both of you. I will rearrange the entire seating." The governor looked up from the paper plate where Cecilia was carefully serving her a slice of my pecan pie, the one that had been hidden behind the hydrangeas. "That is very kind, Mrs. Ellsworth, but I am quite comfortable here. Corinne and I eat lunch together at the Capitol most Tuesdays. This feels familiar." She paused. "Besides, I think the company at this table is the best in the house." My mother stood there for 7 seconds. I counted. Then she turned and walked back to the dining room. I heard Meredith's voice, sharp and low. "Mom, did you know about this?" And my mother's answer, barely a whisper. "No, I did not." Meredith appeared next. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her face struggling between professional composure and something raw and uncontrolled underneath. "Corinne, you are the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Governor?" "Yes." "Since when?" "The promotion was November 5th, but I have been in the Governor's office for 3 years and 7 months. Meredith's jaw tightened. "Why did you never tell us?" I looked at her calmly. "I did tell you, Meredith. You laughed and called it IT support for farmers." She had no answer for that. She stood in the doorway for another moment, then turned and walked back to the dining room without another word. Governor Chen stayed for 47 minutes. She ate turkey off a paper plate. She drank water from a plastic cup. She helped Cecilia draw an entire flock of turkeys and showed Oliver a photograph on her phone of the governor's mansion decorated for Christmas. She told stories about growing up in Falls Church, about her own mother who had worked as a seamstress and who had never once attended a parent-teacher conference because she could not get time off from the factory. She talked about what it meant to be underestimated. And she talked about me. She told Oliver and Cecilia that their aunt had written the policy that brought internet to 43 counties where children could not do their homework because there was no connection. She told them that their aunt had stayed in her office until 11:45 at night working on the rural healthcare report. She told them that their aunt was, in her words, the hardest working person I have ever had the privilege of leading. She said all of this at the card table. In the kitchen. On a folding chair. On purpose. And through the doorway, I could see my mother standing at the edge of the dining room, one hand on the back of her chair, watching the governor of Virginia praise the daughter she had seated next to the refrigerator. My mother's face was a landscape of emotions I had never seen on her before. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something deeper. the slow, grinding recognition that she had spent 34 years building a story about her family, and the real story had just walked into her kitchen and sat down on a folding chair. When the governor left at 6:49, she hugged me at the front door. "You did not need me here tonight, Corinne. You know that." "I know." "Good. Because the only thing I did was sit in the chair. Everything you have built, every policy, every promotion, every county you changed, that was you. All of it." She squeezed my hand. "I will see you Monday, Deputy." "And Corinne, happy Thanksgiving." Her SUV pulled out of the driveway. The red taillights disappeared down Ivy Road. I stood on the porch for a long moment, breathing the cold November air. Then I went back inside. The dining room was a museum of discomfort. The porters were already putting on their coats, making excuses about the drive home. The Davenports were thanking my mother in voices that were too cheerful, too bright, the way people sound when they are desperate to flee. Dr. Shale was standing in the hallway, looking at me as if he had never seen me before. Aunt Regina was sitting at the table with tears streaming down her face. She did not wipe them. Keith and Amara sat motionless, staring at their plates. My mother was in the kitchen scrubbing a pot that she had already cleaned, her back to the room, her shoulders rigid as iron. My father was sitting alone at the far end of the formal dining table, holding an empty wine glass, staring at the place card that read, "Oliver," in my mother's perfect calligraphy. One by one, the guests left. Mrs. Davenport squeezed my arm at the door and whispered, "I am so proud of you, dear. So proud." "Doctor?" Shale shook my hand with both of his and said, "Deputy Chief of Staff, my God, Corinne, your grandmother would have wept with joy." Aunt Regina hugged me for a long time in the hallway and said nothing at all, because sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who have no words. By 7:40, it was just family. My parents. Meredith. Trevor. The children were in the playroom, oblivious and happy. The house felt enormous and hollow and thick with things that nobody knew how to say. My mother spoke first. She was still at the kitchen sink, her back to the room, her voice cracked and unsteady. "You could have told me, Corinne." I sat down at the formal dining table. For the first time that entire day, I sat at the table with the Lenox china and the sterling silver. "I did tell you, Mom, multiple times. I told you I worked at the governor's office. You said, 'That is nice, dear.' I told Dad I was promoted. He said, 'Can you pass the potatoes?' I told Meredith about my policy work. She called it IT support for farmers. I told all of you. None of you were listening." Meredith leaned against the counter. "You should have been more specific. You should have said you worked directly for the governor." "Why, Meredith? Why do I have to perform my credentials for you to treat me with basic dignity? Why does my work only count when it comes with a title that impresses you?" My father spoke from the end of the table. His voice was hoarse. "Fragile. Corinne, I am sorry." "For what specifically, Dad?" He was quiet for a very long time. "For not asking. For never asking what you did, who you were, what you were building. For letting your mother decide who mattered and who did not, and never once having the courage to disagree. For 34 years of choosing the easy silence over the hard conversation." He set down the empty wine glass. His hands were shaking. "I saw you today sitting in that kitchen, eating off a paper plate. And the governor of Virginia walked past our table to sit with you. And I thought, my God, what have we done to our daughter?" I did not cry. I did not gloat. I did not deliver a speech or make demands or list grievances. I just sat there at the table where I had never been given a seat, and I let the silence do the work that I had spent 34 years trying to do with words. My mother called me 3 days later. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. She said, "I need you to know that I love you." I said, "I know you love me, Mom, but love without attention is just a word." She cried. I did not. Meredith emailed me the following week. She wrote 4 paragraphs about how she had been thinking about the card table and about all the years she had treated my career as a punchline. She wrote, "I did not realize how deeply I had absorbed Mom's ranking of us. I thought I was joking. I was not joking. I was reinforcing something cruel, and I am ashamed." I read it twice. I did not respond that week. I let her sit with it. I see my parents now, once a month. We meet at a restaurant in Charlottesville. Neutral territory. No folding tables, no place cards. The conversations are careful. My mother asks about my work, and I tell her, and she listens. Not perfectly, not naturally, but she listens. My father asks questions, specific ones, about the governor, about legislation, about the healthcare clinics. He writes things down on a small notepad he started carrying in his jacket pocket. He looks up the bills I mention and brings them up at the next dinner. It is clumsy and late and insufficient, but it is real. "Meredith and I had coffee in Richmond last month," she said. "I keep thinking about what the governor said, that you are the hardest working person she has ever led. And I realized I have never once told you that I admire you. So, I am telling you now, I admire you, Corinne." I looked at her over my coffee and said, "Thank you. That means something." And it did. Not because I needed her admiration to feel whole. I had stopped needing that a long time ago. It meant something because it was the first honest thing she had ever said to me without a performance attached to it. No audience, no witnesses, no one to impress, just two sisters in a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon, trying to find something real in the wreckage of 34 years of pretending. I thought about something the governor said to me once during a late night in the office, after a particularly brutal legislative session. We were eating Thai food from containers, and she said, "Corinne, the hardest part of leadership is not making the difficult decisions. It is making the quiet ones, the ones nobody sees, the ones where you choose dignity over spectacle, boundaries over confrontation, patience over proof. Those are the decisions that define you." I think about that every time I sit down at a table now. Any table, because a table is just furniture. The people around it are what make it matter. And I would rather sit at a folding card table with one person who truly sees me than at a formal dining table with 20 people who have spent a lifetime looking through me. I want to say something to you, wherever you are, whatever table you are sitting at right now. If you have been the person your family seated in the kitchen, if you have been the daughter they forgot to introduce, if you have been building something extraordinary while the people who were supposed to love you looked the other way, hear me. You do not need their permission. You do not need their place card. You do not need them to rearrange the seating chart and make room for you at a table that should have always had your name on it. Build your own table. Set your own places. And when the right people find you, and they will find you, they will not care whether the tablecloth is linen or paper. They will just sit down. I did not get revenge on my family. I got something quieter and more powerful than revenge. I got proof that the people who truly see you will always find you, even in the smallest room in the house. And the people who do not see you? That was never a failure of your visibility. It was a failure of their attention. You were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who refused to look. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if the governor had not come that night. If I had just sat at the card table, eaten my dinner on a paper plate, helped Cecilia with her crayons, and driven home alone the way I always did. And I think the answer is, I would have been fine, because the table does not define you. The people who put you there define themselves. I was already the deputy chief of staff before anyone in my family knew it. The title did not change when the governor walked through the door. The only thing that changed was their awareness. And that is the difference between being invisible and being unseen. Invisible means you do not exist. Unseen means they chose not to look. I existed the whole time. I was right there in the kitchen. And I was extraordinary. My name is Corinne Ellsworth. I am 34 years old. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And last Thanksgiving, I ate turkey off a paper plate at a folding card table with the most powerful woman in the state, and it was the best meal of my life. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever outgrown the people who were supposed to love you the most? And if you have, did you build your own table or are you still waiting for a seat at theirs? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you so much for being here through every word of this story. I know it was long, and I know some of these moments were heavy. And the simple fact that you stayed tells me something beautiful about who you are. You are someone who believes that the quiet ones have stories worth hearing. Every view, every comment, every time you share this video with a friend who needs to hear it, you are helping us build something that matters. We are 3 women who started Revenge Chronicles because we were tired of the loudest voice winning. With AI narration and a whole lot of heart, we bring these real inspired stories to life every single day because we know that somewhere out there, a woman is sitting at the wrong table, and she needs to know she is not alone. If that is you, welcome. You are home now. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. We will see you tomorrow.